The story starts at a funeral. Guns are fired into the sky, and then we go back 2 weeks earlier. Lieutenant Commander James Reese is leading a military mission. His team is 5 kilometers from the coast of Syria. They are about to carry out a secret operation. They enter through a sewer. Their goal is to stop a dangerous arms dealer, but the place is full of tripwires, explosives, and dirty water on the floor. As they move carefully through, they suddenly face enemy soldiers and come under heavy fire. One of the men accidentally hits a tripwire, which causes a big explosion. 12 Navy SEALs are killed. James Reese and a few others survive, but the mission is a failure. Reese calls off the mission and escapes to safety. Back at base, he is questioned about what happened, but the audio recording of the mission sounds different from what he actually remembers. A doctor also checks him out and tells him he may be experiencing memory loss. The doctor also tells him to stop drinking. In the very next scene, Reese is at a bar having a drink. Reese eventually gets home. His friend Ben Edwards picks him up. James tells Ben that the mission was a trap and that the audio recordings his commanders have may be fake. Ben agrees to look into it. Reese goes home to his wife Lauren and their daughter Lucy. He puts Lucy to bed, and she shows him a drawing she made of the two of them. But James has no memory of her drawing it. This could be because of his head injury or PTSD, but the story leaves it unclear. The next morning, Reese gets an urgent call. His teammate Ernest Boozer Vickers has been found shot dead in his apartment using the team's pistol. Reese is shocked and confused. He and Boozer were drinking together just the day before. Also, Boozer always said he hated that particular gun. Things get even stranger when Reese finds out that Boozer has actually been dead for 2 days, not one. Reese goes straight back to base for answers. He is sure the audio was tampered with and that the mission intel was wrong from the start. He believes his team walked into a trap. Feeling alone, Reese contacts Katie Buranek, a reporter. He had met her earlier at the bar with Boozer and ignored her talk of a conspiracy. Now he reaches out to her, and she comes to his home. Katie does not think it is a conspiracy. She believes the team has had far too little rest compared to others, and that this could be causing serious mental and physical problems. After Katie leaves, James tells his wife he thinks he needs to see a doctor. While inside an MRI machine, he has flashbacks to the mission. When he comes out, things take a dangerous turn. A group of assassins break into the room and attack him. Reese grabs one of their guns and shoots him dead. The other attacker escapes, but Reese gets a look at his face. When he looks at the gun he took, he realizes it is actually his own pistol, the one he had left hidden at home. He knows his house is in danger and rushes back. But it is too late. His wife and daughter have been killed. James is now living through the worst moments of his life. His wife and daughter are gone. Half his team is dead, and his memories of everything that happened seem to be fading too. He attends Lauren's funeral and listens to people share memories of her, but it becomes too painful and he goes home. Alone in his dark and quiet house, James struggles with the pain of his past. We see several flashbacks of his happy family life, which has now turned into a nightmare. The next morning, a man named Special Agent Joshua Holder from the NCIS comes to visit. He says there is a problem with James' story about the gun in the safe. Reese believes the attackers were highly trained professionals, but Holder is not convinced. He questions where the gun was actually kept and suggests it may not have been in the safe at all. After this, James goes to Admiral Pillar and shares his theory that everything is connected to the mission that went wrong. The Admiral is not pleased. He reminds James again about his mental state and tells him he is lucky to still have his job. James then suddenly grabs Pillar by the throat and pushes him against the wall. He eventually lets go and walks away. Meanwhile, Katie meets with Holder. Holder tells her he thinks Reese may have actually killed his own family, but Katie has a different idea. She visits the crime scene and notices something strange. There are no bullet fragments and no signs of a fight. This means either James imagined the whole attack, or someone cleaned up the scene very carefully to make him look guilty. Katie shares this theory with James and suggests they work together to clear his name. James believes Holder wants to pin the blame on him, but since James is still free, that does not quite add up. It then becomes clear that Holder was actually the masked attacker who came after Reese that night. He was also the first person to show up at Boozer's apartment. When James looks closely at Holder, he recognizes his eyes from the attack and realizes Holder may have killed his family too. Meanwhile, Katie updates her boss Jordan Groff on her investigation. Jordan is getting impatient and wants a story ready in less than 24 hours, putting more pressure on Katie. James now focuses on Holder and wants to find out if he is truly a corrupt agent. He breaks into Holder's apartment and works with Ben Edwards to dig up information on him. James is then interrupted by Secretary Hartley, who is concerned about what James did to Admiral Pillar. James brings up Holder as a possible connection. Then news comes in that the Iranian chemical weapons specialist, the man Reese was originally sent to stop, has been killed. When Reese gets home, he finds out that Holder had pulled his fingerprints several days before the break-in. This means Holder could have used them to open the high-security safe where the gun was kept. He could be their man. Meanwhile, Katie pays to get hold of the hospital report. She calls Jordan and tells him to find a neurologist for her, saying the story is getting even bigger. That night, James finds Holder and puts a gun in his mouth. He demands Holder show in his arm to check for a knife wound from their earlier fight. There is no wound, but James still believes Holder set him up. Holder eventually talks. He admits he was paid for information. He gives James a name, Saul Agnon, and says he is the person James is really looking for. Suddenly, Holder jumps at James. James pulls the trigger and shoots him dead. He then sets the scene to make it look like a suicide and disappears into the night. James burns all the information he had gathered on Josh Holder. He wants to make sure he leaves no trace behind. He crosses Holder's name off his list and writes down a new name, Saul Agnon. This man works for a company called Capstone Industries and holds the position of Vice President of Asset Management. With Holder dead, James has nothing holding him back. He packs up his things, including a large amount of weapons, and sets off to find Agnon. Meanwhile, Katie reports back to Jordan with what she has discovered. Doctors had wanted to run more tests on Reese, but he had left before they could finish. This appears to go against military rules, possibly to make him look unstable. On top of that, Katie finds out that Reese actually has a brain tumor, which is known to cause paranoia and confusion. This explains the symptoms he has been experiencing. James meets Katie at a restaurant and tells her about Saul Agnon. She shows him the medical results, but James spots someone nearby acting strangely and quickly leaves. The person had been sent to kill Reese, but James gets the upper hand and overpowers him. The man also has files about Reese on him, which James takes and shows to Katie. James realizes he is no longer safe and decides to go into hiding. He apologizes to Katie for dragging her into this, but she chooses to keep helping. She plans to look into Capstone Industries and find out how it connects to everything. Saul Agnon is shaken by recent events and goes to meet his boss, Steve Horn. Steve is not worried and tells Saul to carry on with his plans and head to Santa Barbara to close an important business deal. What Saul does not know is that Ben Edwards has been sent to watch him. This happens after Ben meets up with James, who is lying low at a motel. That night, James sneaks up on Saul at his home, knocks him out, and ties him up. When Saul wakes up, he finds himself face to face with Reese. James demands answers. Saul reveals the name Steve Horn. Steve made his money in the tech industry before moving into his current role. Saul is just a middleman. Steve is the real person behind everything. He has connections in many places and was the one who set up the ambush in Syria. This is all linked to something called Project ARD 4895, which involves a huge amount of money. Saul also reveals that a hitman named Marcus Boykin is connected to the murders of James' wife and daughter. At the same moment, Katie independently reaches the same conclusion and finds out about Project ARD 4895 through her own sources. All roads lead back to Steve Horn, who appears to be the one running everything. James knows he needs to confront him. But first, Saul cannot be left alive. James stages the scene to make it look like Saul died from a drug overdose, leaving a needle in his arm. We see Marcus Boykin, the next name on James' list. He updates something on his profile and heads out onto the road. As he does, we cut to James, who is watching him through the lens of a sniper rifle from a high position above. James shoots Marcus in cold blood. The car flips over and Marcus is left in a bloody mess inside the upturned vehicle. James walks down, takes Marcus' phone, and uses the facial recognition on it to unlock it and take whatever information Marcus had been hiding. He then crosses Marcus' name off his list and turns his attention to the man at the top, Steve Horn. However, the police are closing in on James. They have footage of him and an unknown woman during a street shootout. That woman is Katie. Officers begin running tests to figure out who she is, while Katie continues to stay out of sight. Secretary Hartley is being kept updated on the situation. He decides to make the upcoming hearing public so that senators are on record showing whether they side with special interests or with military soldiers. Meanwhile, Steve Horn holds a big meeting with his group, but the members are losing confidence in him. After what happened with Saul, he needs a new VP, and people are beginning to doubt his business deals and plans. That night, Katie messages James to tell him she believes other members of the platoon may also have brain tumors. But the next morning, police show up at her door and start asking questions about James Reese. Katie pushes back, bringing up Saul's connection to everything. But with both Holder and Saul now dead, the officers use this to pressure her into sharing what she knows. She does not know very much, and she eventually tells them she will contact them if she finds out where James is. Steve Horn reworks his deal with Richard, an agent working alongside Secretary Hartley. It is not entirely clear what the final goal is, but it seems the two may be working together behind Hartley's back. At the same time, James finds out that young killers are being trained inside a warehouse by a man known only as Navajas. This is the man who killed James' family. The smart move would be to shoot him from a distance, but James is too full of rage and wants to face him personally so the man knows exactly who has come for him. Ben agrees to go in with him, but then James suddenly passes out. When James wakes up, he is speaking with a doctor who tells him he could get his life back in 6 to 9 months if he gets treatment for his tumor. Without it, he could die. James decides to take medication to hold off the symptoms for now, putting off proper treatment until he has finished what he started. The mission goes ahead. James and Ben storm the warehouse with machine guns, killing several people inside before finding Navajas. They torture him to death. Meanwhile, Katie receives an important phone call. She finds out that 6 years ago, Steve Horn bought a share in a pharmaceutical company called Nobelum and shifted its focus entirely to military brain-enhancing drugs when the company was struggling. Since then, Steve has been supplying these drugs to various branches. There are also rumors that he is close to buying the entire company for $70 billion, which would send shockwaves through the business world. After learning this, Katie makes a decision and chooses to leave. We go back to Iraq in 2007, where James is leading his team on a mission. They fight through the streets, pushing past enemy soldiers as they rush to a crash site to rescue survivors. James finds a woman named Riley and helps her. But when he turns around, he sees Lucy standing there instead. It is another dream sequence, but it helps explain why Riley is important to the story and why she is loyal to James. Back in the present, Steve Horn is getting closer to completing his big business deal. James is outside watching as a man named Tony Lane goes in to question Steve Horn about his connection to James Reese. Steve stays calm and says he does not know Reese, but his tattoos suggest otherwise as they indicate he and Reese served in the same military unit. Steve brushes this off and says the tattoos are simply a way of honoring friends and family who have served. Meanwhile, Katie goes to meet a man named Mike, who is being pressured by Capstone to hand over a deciding share of his business. In private, she brings up Project ARD 4895 and suggests it may have been used during the Syria mission that went wrong. She gives Mike her contact details and tells him to reach out when he is ready to talk. The FBI are now watching Katie. James realizes this and sends her a warning message as she leaves the building, telling her she has been compromised. Mike eventually agrees to talk and arranges to meet Katie. But that same night, Steve finds out what Mike is planning and sends his men after them. While his men rush to track them down, Mike meets Katie in the subway and tells her what he knows. He reveals that ARD 4895 is an experimental drug made by Nobelum Pharmaceuticals to treat PTSD. It was first tested on animals and showed good results, but was then rushed into testing on humans too soon. The drug has not been properly tested and has been causing brain tumors in the people who take it. This is why Steve Horn is in such a rush to close his deal. He knows the drug is worthless and does not want investors to find out. Mike also reveals that 100 million shares were quietly handed to shell companies for a large payout a few months earlier. The plan to use Syrian soldiers to kill the SEAL team, who had taken the drug and developed tumors as a result, was meant to cover all of this up. But the plan is clearly not worked out. Before Mike can say anything more, an assassin sent by Horn kills him. Katie runs up the stairwell and shoots the attacker to protect herself. James shows up and gets Katie to safety. After she tells him everything she has learned, he asks for a list of the companies that profited. Katie refuses, saying the only right way to tell this story is through the proper channels. James is not willing to wait and is focused on finding the men responsible and making them pay. Ben warns that rushing in will raise questions, but as they dig deeper, more secrets come to light. It turns out that the Admiral's name is on the list of those who profited. Filled with rage, James decides to build a homemade bomb to deal with Steve Horn. The next morning, Steve Horn holds a press conference outside his headquarters. He blames James for Mike's death and claims James suffered a mental breakdown and came after him. Katie confronts Horn about his deal, but he tells her it is already done and finished. As she walks away, James parks a car next to Steve's vehicle with the bomb hidden inside, then moves quickly to a safe distance. The bomb goes off, throwing Horn across the street and leaving him with serious cuts on his face. But James is not done. He shoots Steve Horn directly in the head, in broad daylight in front of everyone. He leaves Katie on the ground and runs. We go back 2 weeks before the events of the last chapter. James visits his parents and warns them that a lot of stories about him are going to start appearing in the news over the coming weeks. Back in the present, James is on the run from the police in Marin County, speeding through narrow roads. The police eventually throw down spike strips and stop his vehicle. James escapes on foot into the woods. Tony is leading the search and spots James' medication, the pills he needs to keep his tumor symptoms under control. Even with sniffer dogs, the police cannot track James through the woods and lose his trail. They decide to increase patrols on the highway instead. Heavy rain also begins to fall, making the search even harder. The rain actually works in James' favor, as it helps keep him hidden. However, he cannot survive for long without his medication. His kill list still has 3 names on it now that Steve Horn is dead: Pillar, Cox, and Howard, all Navy SEAL associates. Once the rain stops, Tony brings in a team of soldiers to help with the search. One of the men, Smitty, says that what James is doing does not seem like something he would normally do. When Tony tells him about the brain tumor, Smitty changes his opinion. Tony sends the soldiers out, and they use a helicopter to cover a large area quickly. The helicopter flies dangerously close to where James is hiding and drops troops on the ground to search the area. Rather than a quick and fast chase, this drags on for a long time. Day turns to night and James stays hidden. He is clearly in pain and needs his medication, which Tony uses to his advantage, calling out to James over the radio. James refuses to give up. He says he has a mission to finish, and until the people responsible for killing his family are dead, he will not surrender. When soldiers eventually surround him and he has no other options, James sets off explosives he had wired up on the nearby hill, triggering a landslide. James survives and digs out a woman caught in the mud, pulling her free and bringing her back to consciousness. She is alive but breathing heavily as James moves downstream to get away from the soldiers. James eventually makes it back to Riley, and they meet at an air base and fly away to safety. He also gets his medication back. Flying over the drop zone, he lands and reunites with Ben, ready for the final stage of his mission. James is still avoiding the police and hunting down the soldiers connected to ARD-4895. The 3 targets meet together and think about what to do. Howard points out that they have legal protection and is not worried about Reese coming after them, especially since there are many soldiers at the base who would keep them safe. James is out on Ben's yacht, watching the area from a distance. Ben suggests they try to snipe the 3 men from there, but it is too risky. If they miss, their cover will be blown and they may not get another chance. Things get even harder when Secretary Hartley publicly names James as the #1 most wanted person. Tony takes charge of the search again, noting that James has a mission and they need to get inside his plan to have any hope of stopping him. They must figure out who is on his kill list to get ahead of him. Katie then shows up at the office and shares everything she knows about the list of people who profited. She also reveals the names of those behind ARD-4895 and tells them about James' plan to kill them. All Katie wants is to finish writing her story, but Tony refuses to let her leave until they are done. Captain Howard realizes the situation is closing in on him and that he is in danger. He tells his family to pack their bags and leave immediately. With Howard gone, Tony sends his men to the naval base to look into it. That night, James tracks down Cox in a parking lot and tackles him to the ground. He knocks him out and takes him to the water where Cox once did his military training. Cox tries to justify what he did, but James will not hear it. He tells Cox that he knowingly sent his brothers to their deaths. After killing Cox, James calls Katie and apologizes for dragging her into everything. The camera pulls back, and this moment catches up to the scene shown at the very start of the episode before the story jumped back in time. 2 names remain on the list, and James plans to go after Howard next. Back at the FBI, things become tense when Tony is removed from the case for going too far. He has been getting too close to the truth, especially after finding out that the Pentagon itself approved ARD-4895. He goes to Katie with this information, tells her he is off the case, and urges her to publish the story as quickly as possible. Katie rushes to the library and begins writing up everything she knows about ARD-4895, including the fact that Lorraine Hartley's name is connected to it. She calls Jordan and sends over the files, hoping that getting it into print will stop things from getting worse. She also messages James to let him know that Hartley approved the entire operation. That night, James calls Pillar on the phone while Howard walks into Pillar's office with explosives strapped to his chest. This was set up earlier when James had threatened Howard's son. Howard apologizes, and James remotely sets off the explosives, killing them both. The last name on the list is Lorraine Hartley. She is smart and manages to hack into Katie's email, stopping the files from being sent to Jordan. That same night, Hartley shows up and offers Katie an interview, promising to tell her the whole truth. Katie agrees to the interview with Hartley. She is taken to the secretary's house, where Hartley tells her everything. According to Hartley, they have all been led to the wrong conclusions. Hartley admits that she did approve the ARD-4895 project, but says she had no part in the cover-up that followed. She also says she did not do it for money. She says she approved the testing of ARD-4895 because she genuinely wanted to help solve the problem of trauma in soldiers. Admiral Pillar had been sending her regular medical reports, but he had falsified them to make her believe the drug was working when it was not. Hartley says that when she saw Katie confronting Steve Horn on television, she knew there was more to the story and decided to look deeper into it. She carried out her own investigation into what happened in Syria and says she was just as disturbed by the events as Reese was. After telling Katie everything, Hartley lets her go and tells her to do whatever she thinks is right with the information. The question is whether Hartley is telling the truth or simply trying to protect herself. Katie works to figure this out. That night, she does adjust her story to include what Hartley told her, but she still has doubts about certain details and the order in which things happened. It becomes clear that Hartley's story does not fully add up. She appears to have started taking action against Steve Horn and the others before the street confrontation took place. Katie presses her on this and corners her, making it clear she knows Hartley was aware of the problems with ARD 4895 and that she protected herself by allowing Reese's men to die. Meanwhile, Ben and James are driving and get stopped at a routine police checkpoint on the highway. James hides in the back of the vehicle. It is a tense moment, but they get through without being discovered and without any violence. After Katie uncovers the full truth about Hartley, Ben and James storm the compound with guns. James is consumed by rage and heads straight for Hartley's safe room. Katie tries to stop him, telling him she has recorded audio proof of Hartley's deception. While they are talking, Hartley quietly reaches for a handgun she had hidden on the table. In a final act that confirms her guilt, she shoots herself in the head to avoid facing public disgrace. James has been badly injured during the fighting and stumbles outside, bleeding heavily. A soldier approaches him but decides not to shoot and lets him walk away. 3 weeks later, Katie's story is published and leads to real changes within the Pentagon. James is still alive, and Katie, along with everyone else, is still trying to find him. James is actually in Peru. He has tracked down Ben Edwards. The final name on his list turns out to be Ben, who was the one who passed along the false information from the start. Ben tells James he had nothing to do with the murder of his family and that he wanted those responsible dead just as much as James did. Even so, Ben is the last name on the list. James shoots his closest friend in cold blood and finishes the job. But that's where this video ends. Let me know what you think about the series. Thanks for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.